What is good, Tsla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY in the overall markets. I'm going to talk about why the earnings that just came out are causing the market to sell off, not to mention big data coming out for tomorrow. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Webull link. If you deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 free stocks. If you deposit $500 or more, you're guaranteed 20. And deposit $2,000 or more, you're guaranteed 40. The offer ends tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So one thing worth mentioning is the fact that the S&P 500 and SPY is selling off right now during the after hours. So is the Nasdaq and the QQQ because of the big tech earnings that just came out. Now, Tesla had a very, very interesting day. We started off with a little bit of a pop in the morning, hitting exactly what my target was between 262 and 265. Then I mentioned to everyone in my video yesterday, we might see a sell-off if that ends up failing. And Tesla's trend was a little bit weak because of volume slowing down. And that's exactly what happened. Tesla popped a bit only to start selling off. So now we're going to be looking for a big test tomorrow at this support. Now, whether or not we break support or bounce depends on some factors. That's why I want to focus on earnings and the big data that's coming out before I break down more details about these charts. So the first thing worth mentioning is the fact that if you guys look at yesterday, the market had a tendency of basically starting off on the low end. And then we saw a nice rally at the end of the day because the market was very excited about Google/Alphabet's earnings and the others out there. Today was the exact opposite. The market started off on a high end. And then as the day went on, the market started selling off because anticipation of these earnings was not the strongest. So we saw electronic technology a little bit weak. Tech was a little bit weaker today, kind of mixed. We saw some technological services sectors that were trying to hold the market up, but for the most part, very mixed market with some selling pressure. Now, right now, we're basically getting these important earnings reports from Microsoft, Meta, and Coinbase. And they're one of the biggest factors affecting the market going into tomorrow. And so far, we're seeing these stocks selling off. So looking at Microsoft, basically their capital spending in Q1 reached $20 billion. And then if you look at their earnings down here, you guys could see EPS was a beat at $3.30 above expectations. Revenue was a beat at 65 billion above expectations as well. Operating income was above expectations, and their cloud revenue was quite decent. However, there are some risks of expenditures going up, and that did lead to a bit of a sell-off. Also, because of the fact that this was kind of like a buy the rumor, sell the news event, Microsoft was approaching its earnings day, and instead of continuing to push, this ended up dipping. So even if stocks have good earnings, if they run really hard approaching them, they could price them in beforehand. That's why sometimes you may get these sell-offs. So just to clarify, if we look at Microsoft's chart after earnings came out, right now, Microsoft is down about 3.65%. So this is a negative catalyst for the markets. Okay, then we have Meta. Meta beats estimates. However, they warned of significant accelerations in infrastructure expenses related to its AI build out. So this is not the best of news for investors. Sure, they beat on EPS and revenue. They actually did not do too bad. We saw them with an EPS of $6.03. That's above expectations, with revenue at $40.5 billion above expectations. But expenses that are coming up are not looking as strong for their portfolios. And that's the reason why investors were not as excited. Now, could this just be manipulation? It's always a possibility they're just selling off and using that as an excuse. But at the same time, guys, we just have to accept it and just know that right now, at the time I'm recording this, Microsoft and Meta are both down. Meta is down 2.8%, selling off a bit, showing a little bit of weakness here. It might gap down for tomorrow. Coinbase, unfortunately, dropped 3.6% plus, or even higher than that, because of the fact that we saw them come short when it comes to the estimates that we were looking for. Unfortunately, we ended up getting net income at $75.5 million or 28 cents a share. Their transaction revenue fell down about 27%. And then we saw their services revenue down quite a bit. So they missed when it comes to their overall ranges. For the fourth quarter, they're actually looking at their subscriptions to not be as strong as we expected for revenue. Not the best of news. So overall, not the strongest earnings from Coinbase. That's why the share price is down quite a bit. Looking at Coin just real quick, we're down about 4.5%. So for the broader markets, for Tesla and the others, just know this. There's two big factors affecting us. Number one would be earnings. I went over that. It's not the best. And that's what's leading to the market selling off. So the first factor is more negative. So that is a bearish catalyst. However, the second major catalyst is going to be the data coming out for tomorrow. This is going to be another factor that could affect how we end up moving. But so far, it does look like the big tech earnings will have a bigger effect. So, what's happening with our data for tomorrow? Tomorrow is going to be Thursday, October 31st, 2024. It's going to be the last day of October, the last day of the month, and also Halloween. So just know that 1 hour before the market ends up opening at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is the time they use in New York, just know we have some employment numbers coming out with initial jobless claims. We'll see what that leads to, not to mention the PCE inflationary data report. So for core PCE, and this is just like CPI, we have to pay very, very close attention to this because it affects the Fed's policies and etc. But just know that for core PCE, we're expecting this to be very similar with a slight increase. And then right over here, we have all items for PCE month over month. We're expecting a 0.2 to 0.1%, almost the same as before. This last line right here, we have PCE year over year. We're expecting the same thing, essentially 2.1%, just like what we saw from before. And then for year over year, for core PCE, this is basically PCE for all items. We basically have 2.6 to 2.7% as the expectation, the same as before. So it's possible PCE causes a little bit of a pop because the last time inflationary data came out, it was decent. But even if we do get a pop, I don't think that the move is going to last. I think that earnings are trumping this, and this could still be followed by another sell-off, even if we do get a little pop once this data comes out. Okay, so the market's looking bearish right now. After PCE data comes out, we could see a little bit of a pop, but we still favor downside after that. That's what my main consensus is right now. When it comes to the market, another reason why I say that is because greed is slowing down. We're not as greedy as before. We're getting closer to neutral. Momentum is also slowing down. Greed is becoming less profound as momentum is dipping. The put to call option ratio is at neutral. We'll have to see how this continues, but just know it's on a bit of an uptrend, which tends to favor downside because there's more shorts being bought right now. The 5-day average is going up. The VIX, excuse me, is also looking more bullish, which tends to be bearish for the markets. So we're getting a lot of signals that suggest the market may slow down a bit. So just be very mindful of that. As far as Tesla goes, we did see some negative news. So EV registrations in California basically have been increasing for the last 3 months. This data just came out. However, Tesla saw a slight decline by about 3.5% according to reports. It is most likely because of competition, not to mention possibly even like politics. That could be another factor, guys. It is what it is, guys. Despite this happening, though, I'm not really too worried because Tesla's sales still have a lot of potential for the long term. In the broader, much larger, United States area, looking at China, the sales are still not too bad, and Tesla should still be looking at some strong earnings despite that, especially for the future. So for the long term, Tesla is still bullish. Okay, but for the short term, we do sometimes see things like this in certain areas where politics gets in the way, other factors like that kind of slow down their sales. It is what it is, guys. We just have to continue and not really let this worry us too much. Don't let the media kind of get into your head. One thing that's not good about Tesla's volume is dying. We're only at 53 million in volume. I called this out yesterday. We're lacking the bullish volume we need, and that's why the share price is starting to slow down. Short volume has been going up a little bit. That's bearish for the markets, at least for Tesla. Despite the fact that that's happening, we had good earnings the last time it came out. If you look at the right side, you guys can see our PE ratio. Our market cap is going up with our PE ratio. There's a strong correlation between them because Tesla's still at a high valuation compared to before. So yes, Tesla's dipping. Yes, there's weakness, but you can't forget we're still up so much compared to where we were just a week and a half ago before earnings, okay? So just keep that in mind, guys. Don't worry too much about the downside we're seeing. We're still doing a good job at holding up. November also is historically a strong month. October has been a strong month for Tesla. We'll see how November goes for us, but that's what I'm seeing, at least in terms of our data. With that being said, guys, I appreciate you guys so much for listening to this video this far. Now I'm going to be talking about what's happening with all these different charts. I'm going to try to be kind of quick as well. So for Tesla, just know this, we are looking more bearish because big tech is selling off. We're looking at 255 as our main support. Historically, for the last 2 days, every time Tesla's hit 255, we do see buyers try to essentially defend it. So we'll have to see if that ends up being the case. But if we lose 255, we're looking for a bigger dip. We have resistance to watch for around 258 and then 260. If that breaks, we're looking for the high of the day to be retested. In my personal opinion, I think the odds are favoring the downside move for Tesla for a little bit of a dip. So we could be looking for this to basically retest 255 and 252. We might dip a bit, possibly rebound off PCE data. It's still possible to get a little bit of a pop, but then the move might not last and we could continue to decline to 255. If that fails us, I'm looking for 252 and 250 as our targets, followed by 244. So there's going to be a bigger dump if 250 fails us. Tesla looks more bearish. If you look at the trend right now, it's looking weaker, making lower highs and lower lows. And Tesla is once again struggling to try to break out through resistance. So right now, the chart is therefore favoring downside a little bit more. Looking at the daily chart, I also want to call out that Tesla's looking a little bit weaker looking at this candlestick. Just keep that in mind, guys. There is some weakness building on Tesla stock. Okay, so we are favoring a little bit of a dip tomorrow. We could attempt to rebound, but then that's going to be off PCE data before we continue to dip, just like how we did today. That's the most likely case for Tesla, in my personal opinion. Now let's talk about the rest of these. SPY is selling off right now. We have a range because we like to get bought back up around 575 to 578, and we have tough resistance around 583 to 585. This is the range on SPY. Right now, we should gap down tomorrow most likely. We might try to pop based off PC data. We'll have to see if we could reclaim 580 or not. If we don't, we're looking for 578 and 575 as our potential targets. We might pop a bit depending on PC data. I'm not sure about that. But then the odds favor downside afterwards or beforehand, all the way down to 577.5, if not 575 as the most likely case. So that's what the chart is suggesting thus far. A little bit more downside potential remains. Just keep that in mind, guys. That's what we're basically seeing. As far as ES goes, it's the same thing. We're just range bound between the low 5,800 area and 5,900, going back and forth and back and forth. But this chart is now favoring downside for the 5,810 area or 5,800 flat. So I think the odds favor downside for ES. Could try to pop depending on PC, but then we favor downside to lower 5,800s. So just keep that in mind, guys. That is what my warning is for tomorrow. Nvda is selling off a bit. We have these rejections that are forming. I just want to call out that we're barely at support now. We have to see if we can hold above 138.5. If we hold this, we could be looking for a potential target back up for the 140 area. So I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. But nonetheless, guys, the chart still looks a little bit more bearish. We're still selling off quite a bit right now because of what's happening with these big tech earnings. So from what I'm basically anticipating is the downside looks a little bit more prominent. If we don't hold above 138.5, we're favoring downside for 136.8, followed by the gap fill back down here towards 135. So just keep those levels in mind, guys. The wick down here, followed by this gap fill, are going to be potential targets if we continue to fall, and the odds favor that. For Bitcoin, we made a high all the way up towards the 73,600 area. We came down, made a lower high, and then we could be dipping lower, all the way down towards 72,000 or below. So we're making lower highs here, and we do favor downside, so that's the most likely case for Bitcoin. So we'll just have to see how things end up going. But overall, there is weakness on the charts, so give this the time that it needs. For other factors out there, we have NQ. NQ is rejecting very, very hard right now. We're actually down about 0.4%. So we need to reclaim 20,511 and 20,571. If 20,571 is not reclaimed, we are favoring downside. I think that this could attempt to retest resistance at 20,500 before it continues to fall all the way down towards the 20,350 area. So the odds favor downside for NQ, so just keep that in mind. For the QQQ, we look more bearish. We're looking for this wedge support to be retested. We got to reclaim 494.25 to turn back up. Otherwise, this is favoring downside. Might try to pop with PC, but before it continues to fall, we have a gap down here to fill around 492. So I think we might temporarily dip below this, and then we could be dipping towards 490 if 492 fails us. So just keep that in mind. As far as Aapl goes, we're just range bound right now. We like to get bought back up around 229 to 230, and we like to reject up 235. This is forming a distributive pattern right here, forming like a double top. This could lead to a little bit of a pop after PC before we continue to fall, but the odds are favoring the 228 area as our main support. If 228 fails us, we're looking for 226. So a pop and drop are the most likely cases, and we could end up dipping a little bit lower. So watch to see how things end up going, and give this the time that it ends up needing. For Netflix, we're looking for 754 as our support. We're kind of consolidating in this range, but I do see a risk of us coming close to about 750 very soon. If we reclaim 760, though, we could turn back up, but I'm not really favoring that. I think that the odds are favoring the 750 area. For CELH, we look a little bit more bearish. We're kind of rejecting off this resistance. If we don't get back above 31.39, we're favoring a move back down for 30.5. So I think the odds are favoring downside for Celsius. For Palantir, we're rejecting very, very hard here. We need to reclaim 42.5. Otherwise, the odds are favoring that this is going to continue to fall. We look very bearish. We have lots of bearish momentum building here, and we could be looking for 41.5 and 40 as our potential targets for more downside. Supermicro got a big rejection because of some new news that came out. Basically, there is some risks of a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit for securities fraud. not the best of news. This may continue to dip all the way down towards the next support, taking us all the way down to the 30 area as the most likely case. So keep that in mind, guys. We could be looking for a dip back down to 30 or all the way down to those areas. So we'll just have to see how things end up going. As others end up going, we have Rivian. Sorry, Rivian is right over here. Rivian is kind of like stuck in the middle. We have this resistance to watch for around 10.46. We could retest that before rejecting, but there is that risk of us coming down to about 10.13 because of the big bar right over here, the red. So it might pop and then dip lower as the most likely cases. For ARM, or not ARM, sorry, SoFi. SoFi is rejecting here. I'm going to be looking for a dip to about 10.89. We'll see if we get some kind of bounce off that level or not. So be very, very patient with this. I think we might be looking for a test of 10.8. So watch to see how that ends up moving. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're kind of range bound right here. We could try to push for 222.5 before it tries to reject. If 221.36 fails us, we do have a risk of 220, followed by the gap fill for 218. So look for a pop for 222 and a rejection back down to 220. If that fails us, we're looking for a dip back down to these lower levels. So give this the time it needs. For AMD had a high, a little bit of a rejection here. We got to get back above 150 or else this will continue to fall. And I think the odds are favoring basically 145 and 143 is our targets. So I see some downside potential in AMD. For ARM, we basically have a weak structure as well. I think that this could be dipping back down towards our support around 150.8. So we'll see if we pop it and start dipping for 150.8 around the 150 area. And if that fails us, we're looking for this imbalance down here around 145. So we're making lower highs here. So I think we could be dipping for 150 to 145. So watch to see how things end up going. For Coinbase, we have kind of like a bearish divergence double top. Like I said before, we're bearish right now, especially after earnings came out because they didn't really do as well as investors were expecting. So I anticipate 200, then 192 are most likely coming. For Amazon, we look a little bit more bearish. We got to try to reclaim 194, or else there's a risk of it coming back down to 190 and 188. Might see a little bit of a dip tomorrow with Microsoft. Big tech is having its effect on all these different charts. For others out there, we also happen to have Meta selling off. We got to see if we could reclaim 580. If it can't get at least above 580, I do think we could be dipping closer to 570, followed by this 568 support over here. So I do see that risk of us potentially coming back down lower. So these are just scalp levels I have. I'm not going to focus on those. Just know there's a risk of downside. Microsoft is dipping. It's down 3.67% after earnings, which is going to drag the market lower, or at least be used as an excuse to do that. So I think we could be dipping back down to 412 very soon, if not the 410 area. So keep that in mind, guys. There is that risk of this potentially dipping lower. Can we reclaim 422 to turn back up? I don't think so. I think it's looking less likely. I think it's going to likely continue to dip to at least 412. Google is getting impacted by big tech. So notice how the algorithms tend to be very similar amongst these big tech stocks. Now it's selling off as well. So that means money is kind of like exiting tech a little bit and it's being shifted into like different sectors. Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. I think I just burped. Sorry. We're still seeing a little bit of downside as a result. So if 175 fails us, we're looking for 172 as our next potential target. So just keep that in mind, guys. There is that risk of us seeing some downside. With that being said, looking at a few more, we also have DJT. We're looking at 36.8 as our target. If that does not hold, there's a risk of it coming all the way down for 33.5. The VIX is trying to look a little bit more bullish. We're looking for basically 21 as our resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 21.5. We look bullish on the VIX for now, but we'll have to see how this ends up affecting the markets. For now, the market is dipping, which is dragging the VIX higher. It looks bullish, so that is another confluence. The 10-year is pushing things to politics. It's just waiting for the election. It still remains bullish, though. It's not really affecting the market as much. Same thing could be said about the dollar, but the dollar does have potential to try to reclaim 104.2. So we'll see how things end up going with that. But with that being said, guys, I thank you all so much for listening. The market is looking bearish, especially because of big tech earnings. With PCE inflationary data coming out for tomorrow, we'll see how that affects us. But just know that for now, the charts remain more bearish. Watch the levels I called out for Tesla. And just know we could see an attempt to kind of pop depending on PCE. But even if that's the case, I still think that there's going to be more downside after the market opens. So keep that in mind, guys. There's that risk of downside looking at the charts and the big tech earnings. We'll see what happens with the big data coming out for tomorrow, and I'll be back tomorrow before market opens. So look out for my video before the market opens, and just let me know what you guys think about this video. It should have better quality than usual. and I'll be back tomorrow for another update. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a great day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are across the globe. I hope you guys do very, very well with your trades tomorrow, and just wish everyone the best. And I'll be back once again tomorrow for another update. Thanks again for listening, and peace out.